In episodes 3 and 4 of Band of Brothers, viewers are introduced to Donald Malarkey and the now famous Army motorcycle and sidecar he shared with Alton Moore. The episodes also mark the return of Captain Herbert Sobel, whom we hadn't seen since the men were stationed in Aldbourne before D-Day. Over the years, the story of that motorcycle has sparked a lot of curiosity, so it's worth revisiting what really happened, told in Malarkey's own words and remembered like a story unfolding in real time. After 30 long days in Normandy, the men were finally pulled back to the Utah Beach area. It was there that Malarkey's close friend Alton Moore, a rugged man from Casper, Wyoming, started disappearing during the day. No one quite knew where he went, but he always returned with something slung over his shoulder, large gallon cans of fruit cocktail. The men devoured them in no time. The next day, Moore would vanish again, only to reappear with peaches, sometimes a whole case, which they eagerly finished just as quickly. In those small moments, the war briefly loosened its grip. Then, on the day before they were set to sail back to England aboard an LST, Moore approached Malarkey with a secret. Hidden somewhere in the sand dunes, he said, was a motorcycle. He asked Malarkey to get permission from Lieutenant Lynn Buck Compton to bring it back. With Richard Winters already in England recovering from a leg wound, Compton was in charge. When Malarkey asked, Compton simply shrugged it off. He didn't mind. The plan quickly took shape. They informed a sailor at the loading ramp that a vehicle would be coming aboard at the last moment, and he needed to hold the ramp. When everything else had been loaded, they gave the signal. From over the dunes came Moore, racing toward them on the motorcycle. Malarkey would later imagine, almost romantically, that Moore was being chased by Germans riding like Steve McQueen in a film. Moore sped up the ramp just in time, and the ship pulled away, motorcycle and all, back to England. When they arrived in Southampton, Malarkey wondered what they would do next. Moore had an answer ready. They would simply ride it back to Aldbourne. Malarkey checked again with Compton, who once more gave an indifferent approval. Their journey back wasn't entirely straightforward. Along the way, they stopped at a military facility on Salisbury Plain. Moore had managed to find a trip ticket that belonged to the motorcycle, and after filling out the necessary paperwork and giving their names, an officer signed off on it. Just like that, they were officially authorized to transport the vehicle. With their paperwork in order, the two soldiers made the most of their unusual prize. They rode along the south coast of England visiting lively dance halls and cozy beer parlors. Neither of them danced, but they enjoyed the music and the drinks. For the entire summer, the motorcycle became part of their lives, until orders came for Holland. At some point, word reached them about Captain Sobel. According to what Malarkey had heard, Sobel knew about the motorcycle and had no intention of taking it, at least not until they went back into combat. As it turned out, they never returned to England again, so the issue faded into irrelevance. The motorcycle eventually ended up in the motor pool. Its story quite different from how it was dramatized in the series, where Sobel confronts them before the September 1944 jump into Holland. Even details about Sobel's role differ. Though Carwood Lipton recalled him as a regimental supply officer, Sobel wasn't promoted to that position until March 1945. The series continues in episode 5, where William Guarnere reappears with Easy Company in Mourmelon, France after the brutal fighting of Operation Market Garden. In one memorable scene, he limps into Winters' office, claiming he has gone AWOL from the hospital. Winters responds firmly, no more reckless behavior, and even brings up a place called Lulu's, a small detail that resurfaces later. What the show doesn't fully explain is how Guarnere was wounded. In mid-October 1944, while Easy Company held a line along the Rhine, Guarnere, serving as a platoon sergeant, moved constantly along a mile-long stretch to check on his men. At some point he acquired a motorcycle from a Dutch farmer. While riding across an exposed field, a sniper shot him in the leg. The impact threw him off the bike, breaking his tibia and embedding shrapnel. He was sent back to England on October 17. While recovering, Guarnere feared reassignment to another unit. Determined to return to Easy Company, he disguised his cast with black shoe polish, pulled his pant leg over it, and walked out of the hospital despite the pain. He was caught, court-martialed, reduced in rank, and sent back. Still defiant, he insisted he would leave again if necessary. Eventually, after another week, the hospital relented and sent him back to his unit, explaining both his limp and the show's portrayal of his defiance. By episode 6, set during the Battle of the Bulge, Guarnere makes an offhand remark to medic Eugene Rowe about pissing needles, hinting at an infection likely picked up during his visits to Lulu's. Years later, long after the war had ended, echoes of Easy Company resurfaced in a different way. In 2019 and again in 2023, archaeologists and military veterans excavated a former campsite in Aldbourne. Among the discoveries were 2 dog tags, small, unassuming objects that carried powerful stories. One belonged to Richard Blake, a 21-year-old paratrooper who had jumped into Normandy with the 506th. He later fought in Operation Market Garden before a hand injury ended his war. The second tag belonged to Karl Fenstermaker, a Protestant soldier and member of Easy Company. His tag had been bent and discarded, possibly due to an error or outdated information. Fenstermaker's story was remarkable. He was one of the pathfinders who jumped ahead of the main force to mark drop zones on D-Day. His plane was shot down, and he landed in the sea only to be rescued and returned to England. Undeterred, he rejoined his unit, fought again in Holland, and later made a third combat jump into Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge, one of only 20 men to do so. Though not shown in the series, Fenstermaker appears in Stephen Ambrose's book. Fluent in German, he later served as a translator for Lieutenant Ed Shames when they encountered the horrors of Dachau concentration camp. The experience left a lasting mark. As those who knew him later recalled, the memories of what he saw there never truly faded. Fenstermaker survived the war, but carried its weight with him for the rest of his life, passing away in 1988 at the age of 65.